comic books, movies, TV, and more. Nerds are everywhere. It's time to assemble! It's Nerds United.
Hello and welcome to a brand new and quite possibly well past its prime Nerds United on YouTube. I'm your host, Greg Mahochko. Joining me as always is the co-host of the year, Mike Luther. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Thanks for smacking your system around there, buddy.
Yep, I just slammed a drawer. My elbow, my big strong elbow.
Don't know your own strength.
Apparently not.
What's a good word today?
It's good. I don't know. There's not too much going on. There is, but I'm going to save it for the podcast. So
there you go.
If you really want to know, you got to tune in to the podcast.
Little tease. Oh, little tease.
What we're doing today on the video, Greg, is something that you've talked about for a couple weeks.
I feel like it was August when I pitched this idea. It wasn't, but it feels like it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. But I wasn't 100% aware that we were doing it for a video up until about literally 2 minutes ago. Luckily, I have the list already, and I can sort of talk about it a little bit. But I'll let you tell everybody what exactly we are doing.
So I thought this was a perfect topic for a video because we're going to be discussing our top 5 favorite comic book artists. Now, comic book art is it's highly subjective. Everybody's opinions are different. We are not in any way, shape, or form saying that these, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if they're all different. I don't know. I don't think they'll all be different, but I think, we'll have a few, common points, but, I think we'll have certainly more than 5. I've pulled out some ones that mean a lot to me. But regardless, I felt like this was a perfect topic for a visual medium because we can say, hey, our number 3 is name, and then be able to put up on the screen some pictures of their work. Because I thought this would be perfect for a video for Nerds United on YouTube, since we haven't been around on the old YouTube for a while because I don't have time, Mike. I just don't have time.
I understand. Yeah. That's why I no longer email, or that's why I no longer message you about ideas. Because I'm just like, doesn't have time for this.
It will be a miracle if this gets done by Thanksgiving. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, do we want to start? You want to start?
I think we should start.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can start. That's fine.
Yeah. Let's start us off.
Okay. So right away, when I pitched this topic to Mike, I had 2 names in mind that were like bam, bam, 1 and 2. And then I had to think about it. There are certainly iconic names in comic book art, and we'll certainly hear from some of them or see name some of them. But the number 5 on my list, I went to stories that I was really drawn to. No pun intended, drawn art. But stories that I've really enjoyed and have gone back and read more than once for obviously the story aspect, but also an enjoyment of the art in said story. So a lot of them are Marvel, at least, the examples that I can provide out of personal experience. He did the Death of Wolverine in 2014 and also the Return of Wolverine in 2019. Old Man Logan, and one of my favorite stories of all time, which we've talked about on the podcast several times, Civil War. And so my number 5 is Canadian, our old friend Canuck, Steve Mcniven. Mike?
Dude, that's also my number 5.
Oh, hot dog.
That's awesome. Hey, go talk about him because I don't have much to say.
He's Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
And he did those books that I mentioned and others. And he was born in 1967 in Halifax, and other things that his Wikipedia would say about him if my internet would load fast enough.
No, you're correct on everything you're saying. I know he did, because I had a couple things I had written down is that he did cover work for Kick-Ass 1, Secret Invasion 1 through 4, and then, like you said, Civil War 1 through 7, Guardians of the Galaxy, Death of Wolverine, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan is what kind of drew me to choosing him because of the cover work there. And one thing I was going to say when it was my turn, the way I'm picking them is if I went into a comic book shop, what would draw my attention if I'm looking around and seeing all the covers, right? And the Old Man Logan cover is one of those that drew. So I might not be picking the most iconic. I mean, maybe in future I am, but for the most part, because some of these, like I had not even heard of them until I saw a certain book, right? So, yeah, but that's funny. Steve Mcniven is both of our number 5s.
All right, and again did Meridian, Ultimate Secret, New Avengers, and again is a native of Nova Scotia. So, welcome to the list, Steve Mcniven. So number 4, Mike. Since I'll continue going here. I'm going.
And if you have my number 4, it's gonna be crazy.
Okay. I'm kicking it back to the old school because I'm an old fool who's so cool. If you want to get down, let me show you the way. Whoop, there it is. Let me hear you say. Nope. Nothing. All right. So this my number 4 is he's an artist, but he's also a writer, and I don't think that aspect of it gets earns him enough credit. Had a falling out with Marvel early in his career, but led a long life. We only lost him just a few years ago. Was instrumental in the look and perhaps persona of your favorite superhero, as well as Doctor Strange. He would move on to Charlton Comics later on and co-created Captain Atom in 1960. He was DC. He was instrumental in characters like the Blue Beetle, Question, the Creeper, Hawk and Dove. I'm talking about the one and only Steve Ditko.
Okay, all right. I thought you were getting very close to one of mine.
Look, if you look over your shoulder, you can see some of Steve Ditko's work.
No, this was not Steve Ditko. I believe this was Jack Kirby. Because I believe Ditko did it, and then Jack Kirby they didn't like Ditko's drawing, and then if I read it correctly, then Jack Kirby redid it. Whatever it says on here.
So, according to Marvel.com,
okay,
Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko collaborated on this cover.
Okay,
to create what is quite possibly the most iconic image in Marvel Comics history. So,
okay,
but
who did the most work, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Ditko. When I think of Spider-Man, that classic Spider-Man look, like the Spider-Man that the comics that I had as a kid growing up, which are hand-me-downs from my uncle, those were Steve Ditko. So
maybe somebody from Twilight Comics, Swansea, Illinois, can let us know for sure in the comments, or really anybody. I don't know. regardless, like I said, yeah, Steve Ditko, very, very iconic and good guy. Completely different from
And the swell being.
He's in fact, he probably came pretty close to being on my list. I don't have any honorable mentions, spoiler. But if I did have honorable mentions, he'd probably be one of them. Should I do my number 4 now?
I think that's how it works.
All right. My number 4 is by the way, this is how little I know about this person. I don't really know how to pronounce the name. It is spelled Mikel. But last name Janin, Janin. Now, if that's not familiar to you, I understand. But I first saw this guy or saw his artwork when I read the New 52's Justice League Dark. I believe it's on volume 1 of New 52. I'm not sure. You actually have it at your house, I think. See, I think it was in the comic books I brought back. But he also did other stuff. He's from Spain. He's been
España.
with yes, see. He's been with DC exclusively since 2011. He's worked on Batman, Green Lantern, Superman, like I said, Justice League Dark, and Grayson, which I assume is comic book storyline about Dick Grayson, which I don't know why they just don't call it Nightwing, but maybe it's just about Grayson being a detective. Who knows? But
It was, if I remember correctly, it was Dick Grayson is like a secret agent.
Oh, okay.
So not really anything in the like guns, more guns, less like batons and flipping around rooftops. So
Much smarter.
not a bad idea. All right. Well, my number 3. It was close because I'm kicking myself because I inadvertently left one off my list and I did not mean to. So I'm kind of doing like a tie, but I'm going to go with my OG 3.
Okay.
And then I'll throw the other one in as a honorable mention. He is, I think, most famous for his DC work, and that would include Batman and Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and the hard traveling heroes type. His Batman is fairly iconic in that it typically kind of brought back the yellow oval behind the bat and kind of making it look like the bat signal on his chest, and more of a blue cape with gray tights and high point ears. And I'm talking about the legend himself, Mr. Neil Adams.
Ooh. Yes.
So
very legend.
He's still doing it. He's still making cons in a non-COVID world. He's still drawing and doing Facebook lives and auctioning off his art. And I first I was familiar with the name and the art, but I became familiar with the man in the OG episodes. That's, I think, twice I've worked OG into this YouTube video. So I apologize to all the young people I've offended and the old people who let me rephrase, the old people I've offended and the young people I've mocked. But in the original incarnation of Fat Man on Batman, when it was Kevin Smith talking with Batman creators and people who've worked on Batman in some form, and he had Neil on for 2 or 3 episodes that spanned 8 or 9 hours. And it was just really tremendous hearing Neil's story and all the stories he told about, comics, 40 years ago and more, and creators' rights and things like that. As he's a big proponent of, we've heard a little bit more, I think, even recently with some of the people who, maybe created or played an integral part in what would become a big motion picture success, through like Marvel Studios or something like that, and how, they're contracted writers or artists, and so they don't have much of a legal, I guess, leg to stand on as far as compensation. But Neil's always been very big on creators' rights and things like that. So just hearing his stories, and I remember, it's not for me to like try to paraphrase or recap the story, but he tells a really tremendous story about the creators of Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And I encourage anybody to go back, through the Fat Man on Batman, or now it's called Fat Man Beyond archives, and find those episodes because they're really enlightening, really, really engaging, and just really entertaining as well. So Neil Adams gets the nod for me at number 3.
All right. My number 3 is an artist, of course. That's why it's on this list. Writer, editor, producer. He's done stuff with Marvel. He's done stuff with DC. He's worked on Batman, Sword of Azrael, X Factor, Man of the Atom, the Marvel Knights line. I most recently saw his work when I read Guardian Devil by Kevin Smith, and I believe he also did the opening comic book sequence for Mallrats, and that of course is Joe Casada.
I knew as soon as you were rattling off some of those bona fides, I was like, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, Joe Casada is a tremendous one. Another name that, because there's so many great names, that there's no way to you're going to leave somebody off, right? So I'll get to it right now. But as you were mentioning, like worked for Marvel and DC, editor, etc., worked on Batman. I thought it was going to be one of the names that I have to bump to my honorable mentions list, and that's the great Jim Lee. Yes. I don't know if that's one of your top 2, and don't tell me. Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
Or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe, who knows?
But it was such a late arrival to my brain that I'm like, how do you leave off Jim Lee, from a top 5 comic, artist list?
Right.
But not taking anything away from him or any of the greats that we're just not going to have time to mention. But they're not the ones that really struck the emotional chord with me. The resonate. Like, I love Hush. I love a lot of the other Jim Lee stuff that I've read. But when it comes down to it, like my number 2, which we'll get to in a moment, this was the story that got me back into comics.
Well, and I also think there's a difference between top 5 favorite artists and top 5 iconic artists.
Right. That's why I said it's completely subjective,
Yeah.
And even if we tried to do a top 5, like the Mount Rushmore of comic book artists, no, the Mount Rushmore, it would span as long as the Rocky Mountains. And how's that for geography?
Yes.
It's just water, Mike. It's just water.
Sure, it's not wild turkey.
Not yet.
How many do you ever do a countdown to turkey before turkey?
Nope.
You get excited over it?
Nope.
It's got to be coming up soon. When is Thanksgiving's on the 25th?
Yeah, I mean we're a week and a half away. Less than
we're doing on
we're doing
on the 24th. Then I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a late one too.
All right.
And we apologize to all the viewers. Yes, we have this mid-show production meeting.
What do you mean viewers?
All right. So my number 2, as I mentioned, he was the artist on the story that got me back into comics. Back in 2009, I was at Free Comic Book Day at Twilight Comics, Swansea, Illinois, and I picked up. Actually, I take it back. I wasn't there. Somebody grabbed for me a copy. They said, "Hey, man, we think you might enjoy and appreciate this." So it was through their generosity of the free comic book. But thinking about me, that I read Blackest Night 0. Green Lantern, the DC crossover. It would become a massive. In fact, I have the entire run upstairs in a box. But the writer on that story was, of course, Jeff Johns. The artist was a Brazilian who, at the time, I've got to do math. I don't want to do math, but he was in his early 30s. So a big job for him at the time. And I don't think I'm going to. I've just realized now that he's Brazilian. I did not know that. I had no other. I never looked up his name before. So I feel like I've always been saying his name wrong. So I'm going to say it the way I've been saying it. And I'm going to say it the way I think it is now. So I've been saying Ivan Rice. I think now it's probably more like Ivan Reyes. Regardless.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
So that's my bad. And I think he did some other Green Lantern stuff before Blackest Night, but his work on Blackest Night, I remember I sit there, I tried to do like a sketch cover of I believe it was Blackest Night 0, and it's Hal Jordan surrounded by all the Black Lanterns of his various fallen comrades, I suppose. And I showed it to I think I put it on Facebook. I eventually took it down, but I showed it to best friend of the show, Josh, and he's like, "Yeah, cool." And somebody in the comments on Facebook was like, "When did Hal Jordan become Mexican?" Because it had like a thin like pencil mustache, or look like that was supposed to be the shading and the shadow above the upper lip. But yeah, so the Blackest Night series that started in June of 2009 and ran through May of 2010. I also have The Brightest Day. He's done a lot. He's done stuff for Brian Michael Bendis. He's done stuff for Grant Morrison. Did some work on Aquaman, again for Jeff Johns. He's been at Vertigo. He's done Marvel, DC. He's been kind of all over the place. Dark Horse as well. But I'm forever indebted to him for his work on Blackest Night, because that story again. Without that story, I don't sit here. We're not talking. I'm asleep right now without that story.
Greg, did you name who it is?
I said Ivan Reyes.
Oh, okay. I thought you just kept like almost getting to it. I was like, okay.
Because I said I think I've been saying it wrong the whole time by saying it was Ivan Rice.
All right.
So, my apologies. Mea culpa for being wrong and ignorant. So that's my number 2.
Oh, now maybe he'll subscribe to the channel now that you've apologized to him.
Or maybe now he'll come on the show.
Yeah, that works too.
Whatever moves the needle, really.
Yeah. Greg, my number 2, I can guarantee is your number 1. It came close to it, went back and forth between going to 1 and 2, but it's at number 2. In fact, I didn't even put much about him because I knew it was your number 1, so I was going to let you talk about him. Is Alex Ross your number 1?
Totally McGodely.
Okay, so only thing I'll say about Alex Ross is that I remember that Alex Ross was one of the first comic book artists where you were like, oh, check out his stuff. I think you'd let me borrow Kingdom Come or something like that. And you're like, he's on Instagram. You can check out his stuff. I thought that he and him were like friends or something. I thought it was like, okay, just like I'm still, new into comics. I, had no clue that no, he's like very famous. So I learned very quickly that you and Alex Ross are indeed not that great of friends.
It's not for lack of trying.
Right. But I will say before I turn it over to you, so you could tell more about him. His work is very iconic looking. I'm horrible at describing art, which is I'm glad we can just put up a picture, but we might debate over who really drew this. It's definitely Jack Kirby, but we might debate over it. But if you see a drawing by Alex Ross, I don't think there's going to be much debate about whether or not he did it. here's what it looks like. Bam, it's Alex Ross. So
his style, that painted approach. I mean, first of all, I feel like, and this is only speculation, but when you're painting a page or a book, you're doing everything. Where if you're inking, I always go back, to Chasing Amy. You have an inker, you have or I guess pencils, and then inker. That's the tracer, right? And then colors and things like that. Getting my order out of getting my steps out of order. But if you're in the Alex Ross approach, all those every bit that you see on that page is him. And I'm not saying he's the only one. I think especially with the a lot of maybe up and comers in comic book art who trying to make a name for themselves, they're probably pushing the envelope, trying to do as much as they can, because like, oh well, if they like my pencils, maybe they like my ink, my whatever it is. But in his approach, I think it's so specific and so detailed, and whether it's the Kingdom Come or Justice, or I think he first broke onto the stage in the 90s, which I had no idea. In 1994, he with Kurt Busick did Marvels, and that stands up today. That is a 27-year-old comic book that is just as fun to read now, and I've read it a few times. But like I didn't pick it up till 2012, and I didn't even look at the copyright date and be like, God dang, this thing's almost 20 years old. No, I just simply went for the ride. And same with Kingdom Come, same with Justice. His style is unique. And I think because it's, every Superman looks the same. Every Batman looks the same. They're his life models, stand-in models or whatever. They're tremendous. But also it's the little things. Ryan Reynolds famously says in Deadpool, he's like, "Don't make my super suit, green cartoon or whatever he said."
Green or animated, yeah.
But when you look at a picture of the Justice League, you look at Hal Jordan, and Hal Jordan's like, they're close, like he's not just making something appear as it does in the comics now, as it did in the movie. It's, with the thought, I can, flash my ring and I'm in my suit. He's got to like, crap, wait for me. I got to put my boots on, or, whatever. But everything's just so precise and so lifelike. And I think maybe that's for me why Alex Ross, I mean, we haven't even talked really about the man. He's, think about this. He's only 51. And with the exception of Neil Adams, who I mentioned is about 80, and Steve Ditko, who is, passed away just a few years ago, but again, at a tremendously long life. Like a lot of these guys are young. Ivan Reyes is only like 45. Steve Mcniven is in his 40s. So a lot of these guys have a lot of time left ahead of them to share their talent with the world. And I'm here for it. If I see that Alex Ross is on a project, I'm immediately interested. It doesn't matter to me what it is, because I'm there for his brushstrokes as much as I am for the story that is being told around it. So that's why for me, Alex Ross is my number one.
All right. Well, that means it's time for my number one. And like I said, when I first thought of, you thought of this concept, and when I first
will you stop
was trying to put my list together, I once again, I thought, like, if I go into a comic book store, and I'm looking around, what would catch my eye, right? And so a lot of what we would say are like the iconic ones probably wouldn't, because a comic book from the 90s or whatever or even like early 2000s isn't going to appeal to me, right? Except for my number one, who is definitely an OG, helped create, not only draw most characters from Marvel, and I believe a lot from DC as well. It created a lot of, or at least co-created, depending on who you talk to, a lot of them. Definitely drew this cover, and that is my man Jack Kirby, the OG of comic books.
Yeah. Right. No list is complete without Jack King Kirby. He was an honorable mention on my end, but tremendous talent. I mean, if you think of what he did at Marvel, and then, unfortunately had a falling out with Stan Lee, and then moved to DC and, ran roughshod over there. Had such he did Eternal or the Eternals, created the Eternals, and then went over to DC and did similar in the New Gods.
Yeah.
And Dark Side Apocalypse. So I had a very, I think, unique approach. But, you can't say anything about his style, his creativity, his, work ethic and imagination. And, and he came around too at a time where, a lot of the guys on my list who are certainly younger, comics were an established medium.
Yeah.
But like the Steve Ditkos and the Jack Kirbys, they were the guys who established the medium, So it all hail, to quote Army of Darkness and Bruce or Ash, I guess, hail to the king.
All right. I guess I should have let you do your honorable mentions, but
that's okay. I
That's
can
right.
now, but I don't have to.
I mean, it's up to you. No, okay.
Well, we mentioned a couple of them: Jack Kirby, Jim Lee, and then really was John Romita and George Perez were a couple of the other ones. So again, names that are synonymous with comic books, really.
I will say, I guess technically I do have one honorable mention because I debated on throwing this one in and taking somebody out. But I didn't have too much information about her. But she was the artist for the book that I just recently read, Saga, Volume 1, Fiona Staples.
Okay.
Because that is and the reason for that is because obviously that her art did draw me to the book. I didn't know anything about Saga. I had no idea if it was popular or not, how many volumes there were. But when I at Twilight Comics, Swansea, Illinois, they had it, so you can see the cover and stuff. And I went, oh, that seems interesting. And then I grabbed it. And I'm sure she's done other stuff. So go you, Fiona.
Excellent. Well, Mike, I'll admit this video has gone significantly longer than I thought it would.
Like they always do.
I really thought we talked about this before. Like, all right, here's the name, titles, next name, titles.
Yeah, you gotta add a little bit more to it, though.
Little steak to the sizzle, Mike. Is that what you need?
All two people that watch this video, well, they'll appreciate us talking a little bit about it.
All right. Well, this video brought to you by Wild Turkey, which we'll be drinking on Wednesday, November 24th, at some point that night. I don't know when. I have another podcast to record before Mike comes to the house and drinks. So it's a 5-heart podcast. I can't help it. By the way, you want to talk about a successful YouTube channel, you should look at Corn Nation. They have a couple thousand subscribers. Make us look like nothing.
Yeah. We're close to that. We're only off by a couple thousand.
I was going to say, and as far as making us look like nothing, we're only off by a couple. So either way, we're close. All right. So that is this Nerds United on YouTube. For the co-host of the year, Mike Luther. I don't know. I'm Greg Mahochko. And all we do, we try to entertain you, try to have some fun. At the end, we like to remind you to be kind.
And rewind.
Have a great week or Thanksgiving or Christmas. I don't know when the show is actually going to get done.
Happy New Year.